Welcome back. Today's job is we're going to set up the MFT3 table. As always with Festool tools, you get better value if you buy it in a kit form, and that's what I did. So I bought the MFT3 with the accessory pack. Let's see what we got in the pack. We obviously get the MFT3T table. We also get the FS108T guide rail. This is the thing that the track saw sits on. 1080 meaning it's 1018 millimeters long. We also get the guide rail for the material, the rip rail, I guess we could call that. We get two clamps, front clamp and a back clamp. The back clamp has a hinge on it, and that holds the guide rail to the MFT3T table. We also get a protractor. We get a clamp for holding the protractor into position. We get a flag stop for repeatable cuts that sits into the rip rail. And we have an end clamp to secure the rip rail into position. Have a guide that fits on the end of the track, and that's for guiding the air hose and the power cable. And we get a 5mm hex key, and Allen keys we call them in the UK, and the usual instruction manuals. First thing we'll do is we'll look at setting up the MFT3 table and the accessories as outlined in the Festool instructions. And as always, you get the diagram that walks you through step by step, and then the instructions in multi languages. And it's really quite simple to set up. First thing I want you to notice, if you come in here and have a look, you can see there's a stop that's put inside this rail. There's one of these stops here at the back of the table, and there's a stop in the same position here at the front of the table. First things we do is we take the end stop that's going to go on the back of the table, and it's important that we orientate this table in the right direction. This is the front of the table, this is the side of the table I'm going to work on, and I know that because I have a Festool sticker here in the left hand corner, and that sticker is advising me my maximum cut should be no more than 5mm, otherwise I break the table. That should be at my left hand side. The stop here at the front should be at my right hand side. So that's how you orientate the table. So this area here facing you is the back of my table. You want the clamp that has the adjustable hinge on the back of it. That's the one that's going to go on the back of the table. Quite simple to install. Loosen off the black bolt so you've got a little bit of room. Loosen off the clamping handle so it's all loose, and it simply slides into this rail from the far end. Insert the black clip, and you want to slide this up until it goes against that stop. Once it's in that stop, push down your handle and turn this knob, and then that tightens it into position. Once it's tight, you can release this handle, and this will now slide up, and then clamp that down again. While you're here, you want to check that this is tight, so just put some weight on that, and that should not move down. If it does start to move down, you want to tighten these two nuts up here, 5mm, just give them a quick nip up, and that should secure it. You don't want that so tight that this doesn't slide up and down, but you do want it so when it's locked, you can't push that down. With that one in place, you then do exactly the same with the front one. We lift the handle up, loosen the knob off, and slide this into the front rail. And again, we slide up to that metal stop in the table. Lock it down. And again, pull it up, and just make sure that won't move. That's good. Next job is to actually put in place the track onto these barriers. Now it's quite simple. There's the usual T-slot on the back of the rail, and this small metal area here actually slides into that T-slot. Now it comes locked down, and there's two Allen keys on here. There's one here and there's one at the back, and you simply loosen those off. Don't take them all the way out, and loosen this one off here at the front as well. It's a bit stiffer. Okay, that's got it. We then locate this T-piece on this knob here. And it just slots on. With that in place, we then slide the rail onto this bracket. Now in terms of positioning this rail, the mounting hole, the hole that you clip, that you hang your rail on the wall, needs to be halfway covered by this back brace here. The easiest way to do that is to slide it so the hole is hanging over, put your Allen key in, slide it back till it stops, and that's a good place to be. With that in place, we then simply nip up this Allen key here, this bolt at the back, not got to be too tight. Then we can lift this up and we can tighten down this nut here on the back. You don't want to make this one too tight, just purely nip it up. With that tightened, the rail simply drops down and it should always locate into the lug on there. And that's that, pretty much fitted and lined up to the table. But what I want you to realise is that this is not necessarily square to the table, and that's something we're going to come back and look at shortly. For the standard Festool setup, it doesn't need to be square to the table because we actually square up the rip fence to the rail, and that's what guarantees this cut is always going to be square. So with the rail in place, the next thing we want to do is to put on the protractor. The protractor simply slides on to this bracket, and this knob on this side here tightens that up. Now a good place for this to sit is line up the fulcrum of the curve halfway through the tightening knob, and it's not got to be precise. It's just got to be, well, it's not even got to be near enough because we can adjust it as required. And then this bracket sits onto the back here, and that can tighten down. And we'll come back and position that shortly. So I've now got the protractor in place and I've got my fence in place. The rip guard can fit in two ways. There's a channel here and there's a channel here. Those channels simply locate onto these nuts here inside the protractor. So we slide on in the orientation we want, and we'll do it in this way. And that channel slides on like this. Now you'll notice on this rail there's a cutout. Can you see that cutout there? Now that cutout lines up with the end of your protractor. Once that's in place, you simply lock it down. Next thing you need to worry about is where does this protractor sit in terms of left to right as we're looking at the table. Now, the reason it's important is that when we're cutting across here, we don't want to be cutting through the end part of our guide. A good rule of thumb from Festool is put it halfway over this line of holes. So with your clamp in place, it's the whole line of holes that's just inside this area, so this line here. So that's pretty much perfect where it needs to be. The reason you want this distance here at this end is that when you're cutting at 45 degrees, it's obviously cutting underneath the rail, and if you're not careful, it can come back and it can damage the end of this and probably the blade you've got on your saw as well. So that's a good place for that to be. We now need to square this guide up to this rail. So we lower our track, so it's just resting on that rail, and lower the front track as well, just so it's nicely supported, he says. Okay. And now we want to make sure that this area here is square. You can do that by simply taking a set square and putting it on here and eyeballing it, and that's 1,000,000 miles out. You can do it by using something a little bit more accurate. This is my digital angle finder. Turn that on. Zero it. Okay. And then I can find this angle here. And this angle currently is 90.03 degrees. So that's pretty close, to be honest with you. And your eye's not really going to notice that. But let's get it bang on. To adjust this, loosen that knob off there. Now that allows this to start to rotate. You can see that there. So I now rotate this angle so this is exactly 90 degrees. Once you get that to 90 degrees, lock down that nut. Now what that means is that every time you reference a piece of wood against this side here and cut here, that cut is always going to be dead on 90 degrees. With that set up, you then take your end stop and we lock it in place. So we've locked it here, but if we're not careful, this end can still move around. This clamp just simply slots on to the end here. And this piece of plastic here just catches into the channel at the back of the rip fence. Into place, tighten that down, and then lock it off. And that's it. And that will always give you a 90-degree cut. Put your material in, lower this down, catch onto that knob. That is always going to be 90 degree. The flag stop simply slides onto the rail, allowing you to position it wherever you want to, and that just tightens down. And then that obviously gives you the repeatable cut. So I can now reference my material against this fence, reference it against that fence, put the guide down into its groove and make my cut, and now I've got repeatability. And that's the beauty of this system. This piece here simply slots on to the back. Again, it's got a little, it's got an elongated piece of metal here that slides into the groove at the back and just slots on like that and tightens it in place. And that's purely so when I am using the TS55 on this track, so the cables and the vacuum hose rests on there and it doesn't catch on the end of the plate. And that's the MFT3 set up.